It seems like everywhere you look these days, there's this big push for everything to be decentralized,
Mhm.
like moving away from these big centralized systems and doing things in this more distributed kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, isn't it? Makes you wonder what's driving that whole shift.
Totally. And that's what we're diving into today. We're looking at, this whole trend through this lens of decentralized as a service,
Mm-hmm.
DASIS.
Days.
We've got some really interesting stuff from MMXX Dynamics Ltd.
Okay.
And they've got this clean tech carbon capture solution, which really kind of caught my eye.
Interesting.
So we're going to be looking at a couple things. One is, like some stuff from their company homepage,
Okay.
and they talk about their DASIS offerings, specifically around sustainable energy. And then we've also got a description of their clean tech carbon capture solution,
Gotcha.
which again uses a lot of these decentralized technologies.
Yeah.
So I think the goal today is to sort of cut through all the hype.
Mm-hmm.
What does DACE actually mean?
Right.
How are people actually using it in the real world?
Yeah.
We're going to focus specifically on sustainable energy and, this whole idea of pulling carbon out of the atmosphere.
Carbon capture.
Yeah, carbon capture. And then I think most importantly, we're going to try to figure out why this even matters to you.
Yeah. What's the takeaway?
Yeah, why is this something that you should care about?
Absolutely.
Especially if you want to stay ahead of the curve and really understand these big trends without getting like bogged down in all the technical jargon.
Right. Make it accessible.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe a good place to start is like just a basic definition.
Okay. Yeah. Back to basics.
So what is DIAS? What is decentralized as a service?
Well, I think MMXX Dynamics actually has a pretty good way of putting it.
Okay, so how do they define it?
They describe it as a cloud-based platform that enables businesses to build, deploy, and manage decentralized applications without the need for extensive technical expertise.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there is. What's the key insight there for you?
Well, to me, like the thing that really jumps out is this idea of accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's about making these powerful decentralized tools easier to use.
Right.
So, instead of needing to like hire a whole team of blockchain experts or whatever, businesses can focus on actually solving their core problems using these new technologies.
Yeah, it's about lowering that barrier to entry.
Exactly.
You don't have to be a tech wizard to get involved.
Right.
Now, one of the things that I found interesting about MMXX Dynamics is how they talk about their approach to innovation.
Okay.
How they go about developing these solutions.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
What stood out to you there?
Well, they really emphasize this idea of like adaptive technology-driven solutions. But it's through collaborative design and local expertise.
Oh, interesting.
It's not just about having some brilliant idea in a vacuum.
Right.
It's about actually working closely with people who understand the specific challenges on the ground, in the real world.
Yeah, the people who are actually facing those problems.
Yeah, and it's about that process of taking a smart idea and actually turning it into something practical.
Making it applicable, right.
Yeah, like how do you actually make a difference?
Exactly.
And they also talked a lot about this idea of partnership and community engagement.
Right. Community involvement seems to be a big theme for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they weave that into their whole DAS model.
So how do they actually approach that? How do they engage with communities?
Well, they talk about like building lasting relationships that empower communities through knowledge sharing and capacity building.
Okay, so it's about more than just, providing a service.
Right.
It's about actually empowering those communities.
Yeah. And I think the underlying belief is that the most effective solutions aren't just handed down from on high,
Right.
They're created together.
Collaborative.
Yeah, with local partners. And I think that really underscores this whole collaborative nature of decentralized solutions.
Yeah, it implies a focus on sustainability,
Yeah.
not just environmentally, but also socially and economically.
Exactly. And that kind of leads into their whole thing about sustainable impact and implementation.
Right. They talk a lot about that.
Yeah. They're not just chasing the latest fad or whatever.
Mm.
Like they're really aiming for delivering measurable long-term impact
Okay.
through environmentally responsible project execution.
So they're really thinking about the long game.
Yeah, they want to make sure that their work has a lasting positive effect.
Right.
And that it's done in a way that respects the environment.
Makes sense. So I think we've got a pretty good understanding now of what DOS is, at least how MMXX Dynamics sees it,
Yeah.
and, kind of their overall philosophy, their approach.
Right.
Now let's get into some actual examples.
Okay, yeah, let's see how this is actually playing out.
How are they using DOS in the real world? Specifically, let's talk about sustainable energy.
Okay, so this is where it starts to get really interesting for me,
Right.
because they're really focused on delivering these decentralized Web 3.0 solutions to try to improve sustainable energy access around the world.
Web 3.0. We're starting to hear that term more and more.
Yeah, and it basically refers to like this next generation of internet technologies
Okay.
that are, being used to fundamentally change how we produce and consume energy.
So it's about using these new technologies to rethink the whole energy system.
Exactly.
What are some specific examples of how they're doing that?
Okay, well, one of the big areas is this idea of using advanced blockchain-based smart contracts
Mm-hmm.
to create these automated systems for energy trading and distribution.
Okay, so automating the buying and selling of energy.
Yeah, imagine an energy grid where buying and selling power happens automatically
Wow.
based on like real-time supply and demand. So it's always optimizing the use of resources and minimizing waste.
That's incredibly efficient.
Right. And they say this significantly improves energy access and reduces costs for energy providers.
So the blockchain is kind of acting as this, secure and transparent ledger that automatically manages all these energy transactions.
Exactly. It removes a lot of the manual steps and, the potential for inefficiencies and human error and all that.
Right. It streamlines the whole process.
Yeah. And they're also really big on decentralized solar management.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
So this is where they're combining blockchain technology with solar photovoltaic PV systems.
Okay.
And it basically creates this really transparent and efficient way to manage solar energy assets
Mm-hmm.
and monitor their performance.
Okay.
So, like how much energy is each panel producing?
Right.
Is everything working properly? That kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And, they talk about benefits like streamlined manufacturing and maintenance,
Okay.
which leads to lower emissions and lower costs.
That makes sense.
And remember those smart contracts we were talking about?
Yeah.
Using them here, too, for automated payments and even scheduling maintenance,
Mm.
which, could potentially create local jobs in the process.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like building this whole decentralized ecosystem around solar power.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. It's really interesting how they're bringing all these different technologies together, like
Yeah.
blockchain, solar energy, the Internet of Things, all within this decentralized framework.
Right.
Now, one of the biggest challenges with sustainable energy is ensuring that everyone has access to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in remote or underserved communities.
Yeah.
How are they tackling that issue?
So that's something they've given a lot of thought to.
Mm-hmm.
And their Web 3.0 platforms are specifically designed with diverse user groups in mind.
Okay.
So that includes things like blockchain-based microfinancing
Mm-hmm.
and community ownership models, which can empower individuals and communities to actually participate in and benefit from these clean energy projects, even if they might not have the resources to do so traditionally.
Right. It gives them a stake in the system.
Exactly. And they've also built in things like accessibility features, support for multiple languages, and real-time tracking of the impact these initiatives are having on the ground.
So they're really trying to make it as inclusive as possible. That's
Yeah.
great. Now, I also understand they have this peer-to-peer energy trading platform.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about how that works?
Sure. So this is a really good example of how powerful decentralization can be.
Okay.
It's a platform that's built on Web 3.0 principles that basically allows individuals who generate energy, maybe through their own rooftop solar panels or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to directly trade that energy with consumers.
Oh, wow. So they can essentially cut out the traditional energy companies.
Exactly. It's like cutting out the middleman.
Mm.
And it creates all these new economic opportunities
Mm.
and potentially makes energy distribution way more efficient.
Right, because you're not relying on this large centralized infrastructure.
Yeah. And they've already seen things like lower energy costs and improved reliability in areas where they've piloted this.
Oh, that's impressive.
And of course, smart contracts handle all the financial settlements.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is transparent and automatic.
Right.
And they can also track reductions in greenhouse gas emissions.
So it's fostering this more direct and potentially more resilient energy network.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, you also brought some information about their clean tech carbon capture solution.
Right.
How does that tie into their Davis offerings?
So this is another really cool example of how they're applying decentralized technology.
Okay.
But instead of focusing on generating clean energy, it's all about addressing the problem of carbon emissions that are already out there.
Right, so capturing and removing that carbon.
Exactly.
What are some of the key features of this solution?
Well, the first thing that really jumps out is what they call blockchain-enabled transparency.
Okay.
And it's very similar to their sustainable energy projects.
Mm-hmm.
They're using blockchain to create this immutable record of every transaction and every operational step.
So everything is tracked and verifiable.
Yeah, which builds a ton of trust and ensures that all the data is auditable.
Right. That's crucial when you're dealing with something as important as carbon capture.
Absolutely. You need that accountability.
Yeah.
And that transparency is really important for, building confidence in the system.
Absolutely. What else stood out to you?
Let's see. Oh, another key feature is decentralized technology for resilience.
Okay.
And by designing the system without any single point of failure, it becomes much more robust,
Mm-hmm.
less vulnerable to disruptions,
Right. So if one part of the system goes down, the whole thing doesn't collapse.
Exactly. It can operate more autonomously, making decisions in real time, which reduces risks and makes the whole system more reliable.
So the decentralized architecture makes it inherently more stable.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then they also have AI-driven efficiency.
Ah, AI, of course.
Right. So they're integrating artificial intelligence to constantly analyze data and optimize the carbon capture process.
Okay.
So it's always operating as efficiently as possible.
Right. Using AI to constantly tweak and improve the system.
Yeah, it's like having this really smart brain that's always looking for ways to do things better.
Makes sense. Now, what about scaling the solution? Can it be adapted to different sizes and needs?
Yeah, they've got that covered with what they call distributed solutions for scalability.
Okay.
The system's designed to be really adaptable, so it can be scaled up or down to meet the needs of different projects, whether it's, a small local initiative or a massive citywide deployment.
Right. So it's flexible enough to work in a variety of contexts.
Exactly. And they can do that without sacrificing performance or security.
That's important. That flexibility is key for widespread adoption.
Right. And of course, they haven't forgotten about community involvement.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme with them.
Yeah, it really is. And they really emphasize partnership with local governments.
Okay.
And they talk about how they tailor the technology to meet the specific challenges of individual communities.
Right. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution.
No, they really work to understand the local context.
That's great.
And that helps to promote sustainable development and empower local stakeholders.
So the solutions are more likely to be effective and beneficial in the long run.
Exactly. Because they're actually designed with the community in mind.
That local focus is really impressive.
Yeah. And lastly, they talk about their community-centric impact, which is, a driving force behind everything they do.
Okay.
It's not just about removing carbon from the atmosphere.
Right.
It's also about fostering economic growth and creating jobs, but within the clean energy sector.
So it's about building a more sustainable future for everyone? All right, so let's tie this all back to the concept of DOS.
Okay.
How do we see those core elements of DOS manifesting in this carbon capture solution?
Well, you can see how blockchain provides that foundational layer of transparent and auditable data, which is a key service that they're offering.
Right.
And then the decentralized technology creates this really resilient and autonomous infrastructure,
Okay.
which again is another core service.
Right.
And then the integration of AI shows how they're managing and enhancing the application remotely, which is also a service. And then the distributed nature of the solution enables them to scale it really effectively.
Right, without having to build these massive centralized systems.
Exactly. So it's all these decentralized technologies delivered as a service
Okay.
to achieve a specific environmental outcome.
So it's a very clear and compelling example of the DOS model in action, applied to a really important, environmental challenge.
Right.
I think both the sustainable energy initiatives and the carbon capture solution show the potential of DIES to address some of these big global issues in a really innovative and sustainable way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's important to remember that this broader move toward decentralization has some pretty significant advantages.
Absolutely.
Like greater transparency, more resilient systems,
Right.
increased efficiency, the
Right.
ability to scale solutions effectively, and all while focusing on community needs.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into DIEs, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the core idea is that DIES is really about simplifying the development and management of these decentralized applications.
Hmm.
And we've seen how that's being applied in some really cool ways in sustainable energy,
Right.
from extending access to clean energy
Yeah.
to optimizing solar power
Mm-hmm.
and even enabling direct energy trading between individuals.
And then on the carbon capture side, we see those same decentralized technologies being used to address that critical issue.
Yeah.
Blockchain, AI, distributed networks, all working together.
Right.
And the fundamental benefits that we've talked about, the transparency, the resilience, the efficiency, and the scalability are all really important to keep in mind.
Absolutely. So I think, considering all of this, the potential for increased transparency and empowering communities that these decentralized solutions offer,
Mm-hmm.
it really makes you think of like what other areas of our lives or industries could benefit from this kind of transformation.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Could we see this being applied to, supply chains
Interesting.
or the way we manage our personal data
Right.
or even areas like governance?
Yeah, it really makes you think about the broader implications of these technologies.
Totally. And it's definitely worth pondering the potential reach of this stuff. It's
Absolutely.
not just about energy and carbon.
It's much bigger than that.
Yeah, this could really change things in a lot of different ways.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it for today.
Yeah, definitely a lot to think about.
A lot to ponder.
Absolutely.